Welcome to our lecture from Rotary phones to TikTok. Today, we're diving into how age shapes the way we show up in the world, how it connects us, how it creates tension, and how we can bridge the gaps. We'll take a time traveling tour through the generations, how they communicate, where they collide, and how we can all get a little better at connecting across age lines. Buckle up. We're talking boomers, memes, mixtapes, and maybe even a little shade. Let's kick things off with the big stuff, milestones. Driver's licenses, weddings, retirement parties. These moments mark aging, but they also send powerful messages about the value we place on different ages. What do these rituals say about who gets included or excluded in society? Why is turning 21 a drinking milestone celebrated more than 18 when we gain the right to vote and legally become adults? Why can't we rent a car until 25? And who decided 35 was the presidential magic number? And as these rituals shift, fewer teens getting licenses, more people delaying retirement, what does that say about how age is changing in meaning and in practice? Here's what the data's telling us. We're living longer, marrying later, and hanging on to our jobs like we forgot how to retire. Sounds like progress, right? And in many ways, it is. More folks are focusing on education, getting financially stable, and being choosy about when or if to start families. Shout out to healthcare innovations for keeping us alive longer, too. But here's the twist. The age curve is bending in unexpected ways, and that shift has big implications for how we work, plan, and support one another across generations. Time for a quick reality check. We're having fewer babies and collecting more birthday candles. Translation? A big care gap is heading our way. We've got fewer workers, more elders, and social systems that, let's be honest, aren't aging quite as gracefully as we are. Add to that a social and political landscape that's doing zero favors, and we've got a recipe for strain. Right now, one generation is stuck in the middle, caring for both their kids and their parents. And that's just scratching the surface of a much bigger issue. Let's peek beneath the surface for a sec, because when we do, we start to see ageism for what it really is. Not just a buzzword, but a bias. Ageism is prejudice based on age, and spoiler alert, it doesn't play favorites. Teens get called lazy, boomers get tech-shamed. And somewhere in the middle, Gen X is probably being ignored altogether. It's casual, it's systemic, and it's everywhere. In fact, scholars say it's the most socially accepted form of discrimination, because sooner or later we're all likely to face it. And to make it worse, we're all trained from a young age to judge people by their age and treat them accordingly. Oof. All right, it's stats o'clock. Over 60% of older workers say they've experienced discrimination just for having a little more mileage. But don't get it twisted. Young people aren't getting a free pass either. They're often labeled too inexperienced, too emotional, or not leadership material, as if wisdom only comes with wrinkles. Here's the kicker. Ageist beliefs don't magically appear out of thin air. We're trained early, through media, jokes, and pop culture, to associate age with weakness, irrelevance, or incompetence. And while the stereotypes get recycled, the damage adds up. Youth voices are wildly underrepresented in government and policymaking. Meanwhile, older adults are often sidelined in innovation and hiring. All this bias doesn't just hurt feelings, it hurts the economy. Studies show that ageism costs the U.S. billions each year in lost productivity, healthcare strain, and missed opportunities. So, yeah, ageism isn't just rude, it's really expensive. A generation isn't just when you were born, it's the cultural backdrop you grew up with. It's the events, trends, and technology that shaped how you think, feel, and make sense of the world. These influences hit hardest during your formative years, roughly between ages 10 and 25. So it's less about biology and more about biography. Most generations span about 15 to 20 years, but there's no hard and fast rule. It's more of a vibe than a formula. You've probably heard terms like boomers, Gen Xers, or millennials tossed around, maybe even argued about at Thanksgiving. But have you ever noticed that the birth years for each generation don't always line up? That's not a mistake. It's academic chaos, the fun kind. Generational scholars each have their own take on where generations begin and end and what shapes them most. Strauss and Howe, for example, say history is the driving force. They focus on big cultural events that shape collective identity. John Twenge, she's all about tech. She believes generations shift when new technologies reshape how we grow up. Jonathan Hayat, and Greg Lukianoff spotlight parenting styles. And Anna Leota looks at communication differences across generations. So, as we dive into generational identities, just remember there's no single master chart, just a lot of overlapping playlists playing the soundtrack of our lives. According to generational gurus Strauss and Howe, American history moves in cycles, kind of like seasons on repeat. Each generation pushes back on the last, creating a rhythm of rebellion, crisis, recovery, and renewal. It's like history hit shuffle, but the same tracks keep coming back in new remixes. And it's not just about events, it's about identity. There are deep psychological and sociological layers to generational belonging. It's about where you fit in the story and how your chapter is shaped by the ones that came before. Time for a quick academic reality check. Generational research can be super insightful, but also super general. It often smooths over important factors like race, gender, class, and geography. And let's be honest, it loves a good stereotype. So instead of putting people in boxes, let's keep our thinking open. Generational theory gives us a big picture view, not the full close up. I invite you to notice where the gaps are and start asking your own questions to fill them in. Right now, we've got 4 generations clocking in at work, and it's one of the most diverse, multi-generational workforces in history. What could possibly go wrong, right? The truth is, we're in the middle of a major shift in how families function, how teams collaborate, and how people show up across age lines. Generations influence everything: how we talk, vote, work, love, and solve problems. Sometimes it's a culture clash, other times it's pure culture magic. Understanding these differences isn't just helpful, it's a game changer. Whether you're managing a team, teaching a class, or just trying to survive a group chat with your cousins. And here we go. Meet the last 6 generations, courtesy of Strauss and Howe, aka the original generational name droppers. Just a heads up, other scholars mix things up with different names and timelines, so don't be surprised if you've seen it sliced a little differently. As we peek into each generation, think about your own lived experience, especially with your generation. Does the research nail it or totally miss the vibe? And here's your side quest. Pay attention to how each generation is portrayed in the media. Are they the wise elders, the digital wizards, the clueless dads in sitcoms? All of that media noise shapes how each generation is treated and how they show up in the world. First up, the silent generation, sometimes referred to as the traditionalists. This crew grew up during tough times. Think world wars, ration books, and making things last. Scarcity wasn't a concept, it was a lifestyle. They learned early on the value of duty, loyalty, and keeping your head down and your shoes polished. Their social network, a rotary phone, their shopping cart, a handwritten list and a wartime coupon book. No TikTok, no Instacart, just grit, gratitude, and a whole lot of elbow grease. Ah, the boomers, peace signs in one hand, briefcases in the other. They grew up during a time of post-war prosperity, civil rights protests, and rock and roll revolutions. Think vinyl records, TV dinners, and the rise of the 9-to-5 grind. They're the original overachievers, big on hard work, stability, and telling you to turn off the lights when you leave the room. And yes, we can thank them for the classic parenting phrase, because I said so. Say hello to Gen X, the sarcastic middle child of history. They grew up with latchkey lives, mixtapes, landlines, and a heavy dose of MTV. Raised to be independent and skeptical, they've mastered the art of quietly getting things done. No spotlight needed. But there's more to their story. They're the first post-integration generation, coming of age in newly desegregated schools and workplaces. They're also stuck in the sandwich generation, caring for young kids and aging parents at the same time. And to top it off, they carry more personal debt than any other generation on record. So if Gen X seems a little tired and side-eyed, honestly, go Gen X. Say hello to the millennials, digital natives with big dreams, bigger student loans, and a strong preference for meaning over money. They're the purpose over paycheck generation who love feedback like it's their love language. Seriously, keep it coming. Fun fact, they're also the largest generation on record. Some say it's because people got extra frisky in the late 90s, spurred on by a little end-of-the-world panic called Y2K. If you thought it was just about crashing computers, think again. Millennials are statistically closer to their parents than previous generations, emotionally, socially, and sometimes still living in the same house. This gave rise to terms like adulting, because no one taught them how to do taxes, and parenting styles like helicopter, snowplow, and bulldozer parents, all ways to describe adults trying to remove every obstacle from their kids' path while still tracking their phone location. They've been blamed for killing everything from department stores to napkins, but in reality, they're just navigating a world that shifted under their feet. They didn't break it, they're trying to reboot it. Introducing Gen Z, the first generation born into Wi Fi, front facing cameras, and climate anxiety. They've never known a world without Google, and they can make a point faster than you can say algorithm, usually in under 15 seconds, with a meme, a soundbite, or a viral video. They're fiercely authentic, hyper connected, and absolutely done with performative anything. If it's not real, they're not buying it, literally or figuratively. They prefer DMS over emails, protest posters over passive complaining, and are more likely to start a movement before breakfast than wait for permission. Gen Z is also the most diverse generation in U.S. history, racially, culturally, and in how they view gender and identity. They're redefining everything from work-life balance to beauty standards, and they want representation with a capital R. They've been called sensitive, screen-addicted, and too woke. But really, they're just wide awake. And they're not here to keep calm and carry on. They're here to call it out, break it down, and build it better. And now, the newest kids on the generational block, Gen Alpha. They're still forming, but one thing's already clear. They're fluent in tech before they're fluent in words. These kiddos are swiping before speaking, FaceTiming before walking, and casually asking Alexa to spell Tyrannosaurus like it's no big deal. Born into a world of AI, streaming, smart devices, and global uncertainty, they're growing up in a post-pandemic, touchless everything, screen-saturated environment. Tablets are their toys, and voice assistants are basically family members. We don't yet know exactly who Gen Alpha will become, but early signs point to a generation that's digitally fearless, globally aware, and wildly creative, and likely to challenge every system we thought we understood. So buckle up, because if Gen Z broke the mold, Gen Alpha might just delete it and build their own app. One generation says, call me. Another says, text me. And Gen Z just sends a meme of a raccoon dancing in a hoodie. It's not about wrong or right. It's about understanding the code. Let's be real. Every generation has taken its turn being called lazy, entitled, or completely out of touch. It's basically a rite of passage at this point. Gen X got ignored, millennials got blamed, and Gen Z is apparently destroying everything from skinny jeans to customer service. But here's the truth. Labels are easy. Listening is the real work. And while it's tempting to roll our eyes at what we don't understand, the only way forward is through curiosity, compassion, and actual conversation. We don't have to speak the same language to understand each other. We just have to be willing to listen. Let's talk politics, but not party politics. We're zooming in on something just as important, generational politics. Even though you can run for the House at 25 and the Senate at 30, most of our elected leaders are significantly older, and a huge chunk of them are baby boomers. Our last few presidents? All boomers, except for Obama. This creates a generational mismatch. Younger people are often underrepresented, even though they're the ones inheriting the long-term impact of today's decisions on climate, tech, education, and more. And let's be real, leadership transitions are hard. Passing the torch can get messy, especially when younger voices are seen as too inexperienced, and older leaders are reluctant to let go. It's not just about age, it's about perspective, pace, and priorities. And if we want a truly representative government, we need to make space at the table for all generations. All right, so we've laughed at the stereotypes, unpacked the generational drama, and now it's time to ask, how do we actually connect across these age divides? The truth is, bridging the gap isn't about changing who you are, it's about being curious and intentional with how you show up. Start with empathy. Listen before labeling. Learn each other's language, both literal and cultural. Celebrate what you have in common, even if it shows up differently. And then go a step further. Assume good intent. Different doesn't mean disrespectful. Mix up your communication methods. Text, call, Zoom, memes, handwritten notes. Yes, they all count. And finally, make space for two-way mentoring. Gen Z can teach you Canva hacks, Boomers can teach you how to negotiate a raise, and Gen X, they'll probably fix the Wi-Fi. When we show up with curiosity instead of critique, that's where the magic happens. Generations may speak different languages, some emoji, some email, but at the end of the day, we all want to connect. Let's stop arguing over the Wi Fi password and start building the bridge.